Hello, this is Mark from Productive Computing. Thanks for joining me on this video. Today is another installment where we talk about the world of APIs. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's just a fancy term meaning one program or application can talk to another, or one platform can talk to another. And it's a common language and syntax that these programs use to communicate back and forth. Traditionally, it is using a language or a construct called JSON, which is JavaScript Object Notation. And again, another fancy word for that's how the data is formatted, both on the request and on the response. And once you learn JSON or the syntax of that, then really there's not much else to learn. You just have to authenticate with the service, send it some data, get some data back. That, in a nutshell, is all we're really talking about here. But it is difficult if you've never done it before. Once you've done it before, it's a lot more straightforward. The other thing that's a little tricky is that no two APIs are the same. In fact, all of them are quite different, although they do tend to speak the same language that would be of JSON, but the way that each of these developers or these entities incorporate the way they use their JSON and what they want for a request and what they give you back in a response usually is quite different. And it also depends on the complexity of what you're talking to. For example, talking to Google and AWS is infinitely more difficult than talking to a weather API. Which brings us to why we made this video. Weather is one of those interesting things that doesn't require a lot of pushing information. Generally speaking, you just need to give a service that is providing weather a location. In this case, and in this API, which we'll explore here deeply in this video, all it requires is either a zip code, that goes for the US as well as Canada, or a state, and if you provided an entire state, it'll go and find the capital of that state and then give you the weather for the capital of that state, or any city, and they support hundreds of cities, both here in the US as well as international. And there's a few other formats that they accept for location. But the idea is you send this very small piece of data, which is location. In return, you get boatloads of data, including the current weather for that location, along with all the attributes of that weather, which we'll again talk about here in a minute. Or I can even get the forecast, which says, I want the weather not just right now, but for today, tomorrow, the next day after that. And beyond that, I really want it incremented by hour. Give me the hourly forecast for today, tomorrow, the next day. So that's a lot of information that you can give back by simply giving it a zip code, for example, or a city. But in a sense, that's what makes this API easier to work with compared to something like the FileMaker Data API, which is a little bit more complex, or something like a Google API, which is even more complex than that. This makes a perfect starting point for you if you are now wanting to get into this world of APIs and see what the rest of us have been seeing. Now is your chance to do it, and this is an easy way to do it. And I've got some more good news for you. We've made this file. It's completely free and unlocked. All you need to do is become a student. There's no charge, but become a student of Productive Computing University and enroll in our course that provides this file along with many others. And the name of that course is called FileMaker Features and Free Resources. Just sign up, go to this lesson where we talk about the Weather API, download this file. It's completely open and unlocked, and you can have what you see here and then expand it to your own liking for your own solution. So what I thought we would do next is take a look at the actual file I've created here that talks to the Weather API to see what it can do and see how you might be able to use it for your own purposes as well as for your own learning of what APIs are like. So first, when you open up the file, you'll see that it's Weather API powered by weatherapi.com. And that is the website or the entity that we're using to gather the weather. Now, you might ask the question, why would I use Weather API versus any number of other weather entities for APIs? Well, there's a few good reasons why we chose this one. Number one, we had to choose a new one, so we went online to find out what was a dominant player in the marketplace. This one seemed to have some dominance. Number two, we wanted one that was essentially free for developers to learn, but very generous at that. You get 1 million requests per month, which is more than generous. I'd be happy with 1,000, but they're giving you 1 million calls or requests per month, which is probably enough to run a small business without paying a dime. Now, if you are using the free account, they do ask you to present their logo and their website address so that people who are using the weather that you're providing can find out where they ultimately got that weather from. That's not a big ask, especially if you're not paying anything for the API to begin with. And the third reason is we've actually had a couple of students go out and use this weather API, and they've reported back that it seems to be more accurate than some of the others they were using. And for a lot of businesses, accurate weather is in fact important. So that's why we chose this particular API. I'm really happy with it so far, and it was really pretty straightforward to implement. Now, before we talk about the nuts and bolts here, I want to show you these buttons. This will bring you to the main website, and you'll need to create a username and a password. Basically, you need to create an account. Now, that's not going to cost you any money at first unless you want different things that the paid account offer, and we'll talk about that here in a second. As of this recording, the free allows 1 million calls per month. It gives you 3 days of forecasts, which is enough for most people. But if you want a 5-day or a 7-day or a 10-day or a 14-day, then the price goes up accordingly. And I think that feature here is one of the biggest distinctions between where you'd pay nothing compared to where you'd pay, quite a bit more per month. And then you can read down here some of the other features and things that are available. Surprisingly, though, the free account comes with what looks like just about everything you could ever ask for, with some minimal things other than, the number of days. Okay, so that's the pricing. So you'll create an account. Now I'll log in with my account here, and then you can kind of see some of the other things that are going on with this particular API. So first, there's the API key, and that's how this API works. A lot of APIs work where you give it a username and password, and in return you get a token, and from that point forward you use the token to communicate to a service. But because this data isn't particularly sensitive, I'm not logging into someone's system to gather inventory, I'm not logging into somebody's system to gather accounting information or private medical information. There's really nothing secure or sensitive about the weather. It's readily available and exposed to the public. Then there's an analytics area where it'll show you how many calls you've done per day. And then you can change the plan and upgrade the plan, provide a payment method. There is a support area if you wanted to ask a question. So truth be told, working with this API for the first time was made easier because I already had gone through the course called API Fundamentals for FileMaker Developers, which is one of our flagship courses at Productive Computing University. It's where people go to work with APIs for the first time. And in fact, when you are complete with that course, you will then have learned how to communicate back and forth with the FileMaker Data API, which in my opinion is one of the most important APIs you could use as a FileMaker developer. After all, you would really benefit by talking directly to FileMaker data either on the server or using the local data API within your own construct. Those skills are invaluable today because it gives you options you just can't get from FileMaker out of the box. So if you are going to learn APIs, one of the great ones to learn and one of the easiest ways to go about that, in my opinion, would be to enroll in API Fundamentals for FileMaker Developers in the Productive Computing course library. All right, so let's continue on here and we'll take a look at this file. Okay, you'll need to provide it an endpoint. This tells the Weather API exactly what you want. In this case, we're looking at wanting to get the current information. We'll provide an API key, which I already mentioned, but that's part of it. You'll need to provide some location. And then the endpoint ends up looking like this. So you might hear me say this a few times, but here is another example of why this API is particularly easy. The information you send it, all the way including the location, all of that is sent through the URL. You don't have to create a specialized payload in JSON format and then incorporate that into a curl message. That's where APIs can get even trickier. This one, you just construct a series of strings and calculations to create a URL, also known as an endpoint, and that information will simply go using the insert from URL script step, and then you'll receive back information in JSON, and then you'll just need to parse the JSON and plan accordingly, which I'll talk a little bit about here as we move along. So if I get the current weather for, let's say, 03051, my hometown of Hudson, New Hampshire, it's very cold there in New Hampshire right now, 34 degrees, cloud is 25% coverage. It includes a text-based description of the current weather, in this case partly cloudy. It even includes an icon, which you can insert directly into a container field indicating the current weather. It tells you what it feels like, so even though it's 34 degrees, it feels like 29. It always felt like 29 in New Hampshire this time of year. Actually, a lot of times it felt colder. Humidity 64 degrees, the pressure, UV index, and so forth. No wind at the moment. The visibility is 9 miles. And it is not daytime. I guess it's not daytime. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I guess it's at 4 o'clock in New Hampshire in the middle of December, one of the shortest days of the year. It probably is, in fact, nighttime. Let's switch the weather here to 92078. Now we're talking about San Marcos, California, where it's, of course, partly cloudy today, which normally it says sunny. But today it happens to be, well, we're wintertime now, so we're getting a little bit of weather, a little bit of rain. Actually, it's a little chilly too, 57 degrees. I know for some of you that doesn't seem chilly in December, but for us it is a bit chilly. Cloud cover 75% and all the other things. And in fact, it is daytime. I can attest to that. It's 1:30 here in the afternoon. This time of day in California, it's definitely daytime. So that's the current weather. Lots of fun to play with, but you're not limited to a zip code. You can actually put in, let's say, Manchester. And by default, if I click current weather, it's going to assume that I'm talking about Manchester in the UK. But I might not be talking about Manchester in the UK. I might be talking about Manchester, New Hampshire, which is another city in Manchester, in New Hampshire. And of course, it knows the difference between that simply by putting in a comma and a state. Voila, we've got it. Or if I want to put in a state of, let's say, one that I can spell here, Alaska. All right, I can spell Alaska. All right, and it will bring me to Alaska in Mexico. No, that's not what I wanted. How about Alaska, USA? Can I do that? There we go. Oh, now we're in Minnesota. Alaska, Minnesota, USA. All right, how about Fairbanks? Testing my... There we go. Fairbanks, Alaska. Cloud cover 100%. Light snow. It even shows a little picture here of the snow falling. Temperature 8.6 degrees. Very cold there in Alaska. Anyway, I don't want to pretend I'm a weatherman here, but I do want to kind of show you how cool this is to be able to get the weather really from anywhere in the world in FileMaker. And this might be handy for your customers based on their business. I can tell you that we have some businesses that are definitely interested in the weather and the forecast of that weather. So I think this will come in handy in certain applications. All right, so that's that. Now, when you pull this information, it comes to you in the form of a response, and that response is this, basically JSON formatted text. Again, if you've never worked with JSON and you take our API Fundamentals course, you'll learn a great deal about JSON as well, how to create it using FileMaker commands and how to parse it using FileMaker commands. And that's what I've done here. And I'm going to take you under the hood here in a second when we take a look at the forecast. Which is now a good time to talk about the forecast. Let's go here to the next tab called Forecast. So for the forecast, you want to pick two things. You want to pick the number of days, so I'll pick 1 day to start. All right, now let me pick a location. This time I'm going to say Milwaukee. And we'll force that, and we'll take a look at the forecast. Okay, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The single day forecast is 32 on the low, 39 on the high with a 96% chance of rain, probably raining right now. Then the hourly on that starts at 12 midnight the same day. This is the 10th. And we've got all each hour of the day, 12 a.m., 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and so forth. Then we have the temp and 0% chance of rain and the icon for each hour as well. So we can scroll through that and see we should have 24 records here, one for every hour of the day, up until 11 p.m. and then 12 midnight will be on the next day. Let's pick another city. Let's pick a city outside the U.S. We'll go to Belfast. And this time we'll do a 3-day forecast. Okay, so we have our daily forecast of 32 on the low, 41 on the high. Pretty cool there as well. And then this is the daily forecast in pictorial form. Then the hourly, this time we'll have more than 24 records. We'll actually have 24 times 3. So roughly 75 records when you consider the 3 dailies plus the 72 for the 3 times 12. Or 3 times 24 rather, 72 plus the 3 days. So 75 records. In fact, if I go here now, there it is, 75 records, and this is just a raw view of the data as it comes in. And the way I formatted this is I've got it all in a single table with a designation of record type, either being day or hour. If it's a day, it handles it differently in the portal. The portal is filtered to look at either day records or hour records. So obviously, if it's a day record, we're going to have a min and a max temp and a percentage and its own icon over here. But then you have the hour records, which scroll down the list this way. They also have an icon as well. So it's one bucket of data, one table that we're pulling this into, and then my layout is designated in such a way that the filter is on the portal simply by saying, is it a day type record or is it a hour type record? Like so. Yeah. So that's that. Let me show you the script for the forecast. That'll give you an idea. Actually, let me show you the script for the current, then we'll look at the script for the forecast. So the way the current script works is to get the current weather, that first part of the demo you saw. It's doing a little bit of error checking. It's making sure that the API key is filled in and that things are formatted correctly. It's not extensive to the amount of where it would be if I was running this for a commercial solution. I'd probably put 2 to 3 times more error trapping here. This is some of the basic stuff. After we get done checking for errors, we then send the information and pull it back. The information is being sent right up here. When I send, first I construct the URL, and then right here on line 16, as of this video, it will be taking that, putting all of that into the results variable using this URL, which I constructed here in line 14. And note, there are no curl options, so it's nothing really advanced on this particular API, which is why it's a great way to start. That's inserted. We check for some more errors. Then we put the results in a field in FileMaker so we can see them. Commit the record because that's what we do when we set the results, and you'll see more of why that's important in the next script when we look at the forecast. We do some more error checking, and then over here we parse the information. We're using some simple JSON get element functions, and we're pulling that JSON in based on the way the JSON is formatted. To know how the JSON is formatted, you actually have to look at the results. So the results then determine how this is constructed. And we learn all of this in the API course that I mentioned earlier. So then we insert the icon after we pull in some of these main fields, and then we pull in the location field. So it kind of brings back the city, state, zip, not the zip, but the city, state, and country. And then we commit the records and halt the script. All of that is to produce the current weather for Belfast, Ireland, along with the local time and everything else. Now let's look at the other script where we pull the forecast. That's a little bit more complicated because we're pulling multiple dimensions, if you will, multiple arrays of information. First, we're pulling in the number of days that are selected up here, that are designated up here. So for each day, then we pull the hours. So we have 2 loops happening on that particular script. That's in the forecast script. We do a lot of the same stuff here. We do some basic error checking. We do the first call where we insert and actually get the data. Once we get the data back, it's almost like you're just in FileMaker land at this point. You can use standard looping and if conditions and go to layout and this, that, and the other to create the records. And I assume if you've got even intermediate skills on FileMaker, all of this is going to be trivial for you. Now, here's just an important aspect of how I design this. I create a new window here to do the processing, and that's handy because, as you'll note, I'm using tabs here, 2 tabs, in fact, one for the current and one for the forecast. Well, what happens is if the user's on the daily and they click this forecast button to go get the data and bring it back, I don't want it to go back to this current tab. So one way to escape all of that and to get around that is to create a new window. So that's what I'm doing here for this forecast. I'm creating a new window on line 39. But I do that after I commit the records because I want to be sure that, one of the big traps when you create a new window is if you don't commit the data that you're currently looking at, when you go to use that record when creating a new window, you're locked out of it. And that's not good. So you want to commit the records, then create the new window. So we're committing them up here. I'm doing some checks. Then I create the new window. Note that I don't go to a particular layout. I want it to stay right where it is because I'm populating all of this information here for the local information, the local weather, or the current conditions, I should say, and then the location, almost identical to this first script where it says current weather. Except this time it's pulling from the results based on the forecast request. And then we actually start creating the days. So we'll go to a layout designated for storing that, which I showed you on that list view. And we truncate the table, which means delete all the data. So that happens in an instant. Then we set some variables and start our first loop. This is the days loop, where it will create a record for every day. But within that, it creates 24 records for every hour. So here are your day records, and here are your hour records. So it's a loop within a loop. So a little tricky to do this, but if you've done any, like I said, if you're an intermediate programmer, this should be fairly trivial, but you might have to do some trial and error. And then once it populates those records, it closes that window that it created to do the work, and then you're left with wherever the user started from, which is traditionally this layout here under the Forecast tab. And that's all there is to it. So the other buttons here on the right will bring you to the API Explorer if you want to put in your API key here, and then you can pull data based on location. In a sense, they give you this API Explorer. If you didn't have FileMaker and a way to view the data, you need some way to test this API. So this is a way of testing this API without actually building an application. It's just you ask it, you answer a few things. You put in your API key, you put in location, and it'll give you all the results down below here in the response. And it'll look like that. It'll show you how it's formatted. It even shows you the call that you need to make in order to produce that, which is very handy. A lot of APIs in their documentation won't provide even this simple call. They won't give you an example what the call looks like as a collective. They'll might show you pieces and parts of it, but like I said, not all APIs are created equal. This one is particularly good and very easy. So when they make a claim at the front, somewhere where it says, you'll be up and running in 5 or 10 minutes, that's largely true, especially if you know what you're doing and you've done this several times. It doesn't take that long to incorporate this. It'll certainly be made easier with the file I'm supplying here and available to you for free if you enroll in the course, that free course that has this file, along with a ton of other information. Lots of videos that we've done since the FileMaker 17 days about lots of features and functions of FileMaker. And we just invite you to that and take a look at that. It's all free for the taking. All this information is something you can learn from. And a final note is, if you really do want to learn APIs and master this, I highly recommend the course API Fundamentals for Developers, or for FileMaker developers. That will, not only will it show you the API construct, it will allow you to directly work with the FileMaker API, which to me is probably the most important API you can work with as a FileMaker developer, bar none. Because once you have that information in your hands, it's a lethal weapon for development. Absolutely lethal what you can do with it. All right, thanks for joining us on this video. Feel free to like and subscribe. Share this with those who might be interested in learning about APIs. If people ask either about how to incorporate a weather API, send them to this video. This is a lot of good information here with a file that'll really get them jump-started in no time. Or if they're just wondering, hey, what's the best way to learn APIs? Sure, there's a lot of blog articles out there. There's even videos out there now on YouTube and things like that. But I think if you want to learn in an environment that's very organized and it has a beginning and an end and it tracks your progress and it's a place you can go and to call your own and you can kind of see what's going on and then even call in for help or email us for help as you go through things and get stuck in areas. All of that is available as a student of Productive Computing University. So thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you on the next one.